it is important to have a podcast like this. I think it's important for people to be involved in local government, because the greatest change agent in your life is going to be your town, your county, your school system. That's going to have the greatest impact on your life. Be scared also about things that are happening in the local level, because that is going to have a greater impact on your life, your kids' lives, your spouse, your family, whoever. That's going to be where it matters.
Hey, I'm Mayor Derrick R. Welcome to the Elected Engaged podcast, where we are your voice for local leadership. Each and every episode, we bring a local elected official, whether they're school board, mayor, city council, board of county supervisor, to give you the inner workings on how local government works. Local government is important because it's the lowest form of government that reaches you every day. Today, we're bringing a very special guest. He is my school board member who represents my district here in Dumfries and Prince William County of the Potomac District, Mr. Justin Wilk. Welcome to the Elected and Engaged podcast.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here. This is pretty fun stuff I've been watching, so it's good to kind of follow up and be a part of this. So thank you for including me.
School board member. First of all, we might have to go and we're going to have to start backwards in reverse, maybe start from your Michigan Spartan days and just tell us what inspired you as far as the education role and being involved in that way.
So you're right. I am a Michigan State Spartan, proudly. So I went to school to go into more poli-sci, thinking I was gonna possibly be a lawyer. But then I also my mom was a teacher, my grandma was a teacher. So education was always kind of at the forefront of really my whole foundation of who I was, what I was. And actually, my first taste of school board was when I was a senior in high school. One of the members, I grew up in a little tiny town, so it wasn't, anything like, glamorous of a school system, anything.
Tell us about this town.
It was a blue collar community. My dad worked for Ford Motor Company for almost 40 years. My mom did off-and-end things after she left teaching, having kids. I don't know how to describe that environment. I go back now and I'm pleasantly surprised when I see things like that. There are the Southline Democrats, or there's a Southline LGBTQ group. Very different, still very much mostly Republican, but there's little kind of, trickling of blue here and there. But so that was the community. I was the kid who went around and stapled Gore Lieberman signs throughout town, and then, driving back and didn't get picked up by the police, but seeing police officers yank them off telephone poles. One of our school board members perished, older gentleman, on a trip up to Toronto. I remember this only because it was like in our local paper. So they had an appointment, a position that people could apply to be one of the, I think there were 7 school board members in Southline. So it was an appointment. I was a senior in high school and I said, hey, why not? So I applied for the appointment. At that point,
Was there any competition, or was it just
there was another gentleman, his name was Dan. I can't think.
You remember that?
I know he had a little meltdown in the room when we were doing our kind of interviews with the rest of the board. But I guess I would say the biggest thing going against me was I was a current student at a high school and would have become technically the boss of, not only in a sense the principal, but of the superintendent. I would have been obviously running the division in some sense. So the majority of the board said no, and they picked the other guy. I did get one guy, nice guy. He did pick me, said it would have been good to have a student voice on the board, which is a whole nother topic of just maybe having a student rep on the board. But that was kind of my first kind of foray in running for elected office, although it wasn't technically an election. I did go for that, but I didn't.
Did you have a campaign?
No, there was no campaign. It was a 1-year interim appointment. So,
Okay.
But we're talking about a town where you put up like maybe 5-yard signs and you run and you win. There a lot of those times those races were uncontested, as are these kind of smaller towns and stuff. But it was an experience. So flash forward, as I was saying, I moved down here, get to teach at Woodbridge Middle School for 3 years,
So
and
this was after. So while you were at Michigan State, did you do any
I
engagement
was
there?
I was president of my
Yeah.
college senate, as they called it, the poli sci
Oh.
program. I was on the senior class council. I did stuff like that,
So
amongst.
poli sci, break that down for people who don't know what poli sci is.
So specifically, my major was called political theory and constitutional democracy. And what that basically means, in a nutshell, is you're basically preparing to go to law school in some sense, unless you develop in a way a backup plan. In my world, I said, you know what? Because the political theory degree could work with the College of Education and make you a social studies teacher, I said, you know what? I'll also in tandem get my teaching certificate. My student teaching year,
But
I
how did you become president of the poli sci department?
we had a student senate, so
Oh, student senates.
student senate. So I was president of the student senate.
What does that mean?
So
So
think
then,
of it like a glorified high school student council, but you're in a student senate. So every grade level, every major in the program got to elect a certain number of senators, and that was our big thing. I was the youngest elected vice chair of our student senate at that time, and then you know things, college
did you have any major accomplishments or things you brought to the table while you were in
as
college?
vice chair.
Yeah.
No, not maybe vice chair. I had to prove another year of kind of after not winning the chairman race my junior year, I had to prove myself to be a little bit more dedicated and serious during my college years, and I did.
Oh yeah.
And so I was elected the chair or the president of the student senate. So
This is see.
so
And
what
I
accomplishment?
think this is important, right? Because we see your level of engagement started from high school
Yeah,
and it continued through college.
yeah,
Right?
it did.
From you serve, right? You didn't win in high school or get selected, rather, right? But you got selected to serve in two different positions while you were in college. And I think that's an important a point for people watching is that it's not always the elected positions that we sit in now. Most people see where we're at, but they don't see how you start and the journey and the process, right?
100%. I mean, if you think, I mean, I'd even say like my stats is I ran for class president while in middle and high school. I lost 4 in a row, and I finally became class president my freshman year. And then I had a little hiatus, and then I became senior class president. So
Wait. So in middle school you ran?
yeah, I tried to be the eighth grade class president as a sixth grader, as a seventh grader, and then lost as an eighth grader. But then I became freshman class president, and I think our biggest accomplishment was we had the second place float for our homecoming float competition, and that was fun.
So you've been almost in office your whole life, running.
I,
Like from
I think I have a better win record now here in my public
adult life,
in
right?
adult life, but. Yeah, no, I mean, the accomplishment of a high school class president is I got to give a speech at graduation, and it was I graduated the year 9/11 occurred, so I had a line in my speech that a lot of my classmates remember and stuff like that. So it was like, reflection in period like that. But yes, so that was like high school, college. I kind of gave you a little bit of the blur, and
All right. So how'd you find a job in Virginia? Leave the big state of Michigan to come to this Commonwealth of Virginia.
well, I graduated during the automobile recession, which kind of preceded the broader recession in this country. Michigan and the Midwest got hit earlier with the manufacturing sector. And I was a social studies, I said, with my political theory, constitutional democracy. Basically, I read a lot of Rousseau and Socrates and Locke, really applicable for the young
Philosophy.
people
Yeah.
out there. I will say, if you're out there thinking of an application with your major, think about poli sci on that one nowadays with the cost of college. But it ended up working out. So, anyways, I couldn't find a social studies job in Michigan to save my life. And so I went to Eastern Michigan had a hiring fair, a teacher hiring fair. And why I had this kind of fixation thinking, you know what, I really want to go work for Jeffco County Schools, Louisville. And I was like, that would be cool. I'm going to go down to Louisville and teach down there. Well, they didn't want me because they wanted only math teachers. And I even remember some of my classmates who had math majors getting little miniature Louisville sluggers. And
Wow.
they didn't want social studies teachers. No one wanted social studies teachers. The market, they just didn't need them. It was saturated. And so my college roommate at Michigan State was kind of offered a position at Prince William County. He went to a table. They talked to him. They flew him down here, wine and dine. He was a math guy. So they were like, oh, a math teacher, we want you. And he mentioned that he had this friend of his up in Michigan who, decided he wasn't going to go to law school after his first attempt at the LSAT and wanted to be a teacher. And so I'll never forget it. I got a call out of the blue. I think I was finishing up working at Office Max, the copy center at that time.
Wow.
Yeah, that was, I will say that for all of our young ones. I worked since the age of 14 and all the way through. And I've had to, balance a job, balance school, balance other things, social life. But so I was working even as a student teacher because student teachers don't get paid. And so I was trying to make ends meet on weekends, working for positions. And so he gave me a call and he's like, hey, you're going to get a call in a few minutes from a principal down here. And he's going to interview you and basically don't mess up, right? So he put a good word in for me and said, hey, I got this social studies teacher you might need. And he's like, and the principal was like, oh, I have openings in my buildings, right? So anyways, I got the call and it was really just one question. I mean, the main question that he said was, what means more to you, having the top test scores or being able to build the best relationships with your students? And that was, the one I selected, right? Because to me, that is really what all that matters is, building that relationship, the rapport, the mentoring, things like that. That always kind of went throughout my entire, I guess, stage as a teacher. And I was hired over the phone. So the competition, I don't know.
Right.
So I was hired over the phone, and next thing it is, I moved down here. My family never thought I would leave Michigan, and I don't think I ever thought I would leave Michigan, and I did. And the plan always was 3 and out. I'm going to work 3 years down in Virginia and move back to Michigan, right? I was going to get my master's in administration and then move back and, get an administrative position in Michigan. Well, I went to UVA. I got my master's, but I didn't move back. So life, marriage, things like that hit you and changes.
So you got married while you were at the middle school?
Yeah, we met, and she's still teaching at Forest Park. And she told me at the onset, it might have been our first date. I think we met at Panera. It was kind of like, very romantic. One thing I was really, that was an immediate check the box was she drove an American car. And coming from
Detroit, right?
coming from Michigan, that was huge. I was like, oh my God, you have a Ford. Because down here, there's really the brand loyalty's gone, and even in Michigan, that's gone now. I mean, you see tons of Toyotas and stuff like that on the road, but that was a very different time back then. Anyways, and she said from day one, she's like, I'll never move to Michigan. And I thought, oh, right, I'll change her. I'll get her to, nah, that didn't happen. So here we are. 19 years I've been here now, I think going on year 19. And not moving back to Michigan. I just went up and visited and saw my family, but there's no roadmap for moving back up there.
Wow. So how did you go from teaching now to your next role of getting involved in the local politics here in the community?
So kind of in a way, there was like I want to say almost a weird like a conflict between the two in some sense. And I'll break that down. So when I left Woodbridge Middle and went to Gainesville Middle, which is of course on the west end of the county, and I still lived in Lake Ridge, Woodbridge area, I decided at that point I was going to get more active in politics outside of school. I wasn't living necessarily right in the community where I'd be out campaigning and working. It's a 45-minute drive. It was like really driving felt like quite a bit. And so I first became engaged with Harry Wiggins at the time, and the Honorable Delegate Michael Futrell, former delegate. he and I were tasked to co-chair and kind of build a Young Democrats for the Prince William County Dems. And Michael and I did that for a year. We were co-chairs of the Young Dems of Prince William County. So I knew Michael before he got elected. And that's how I also met his wonderful wife, Bernadine. And so we did that. I was very active in Dr. Latif's ill-fated campaign against Corey Stewart at that time for chair. We go way back now, right? I'm thinking Corey Stewart, Toddy Puller, remember that name? Yeah. State Senator Toddy Puller. My wife and I did the housing thing where she stayed in one of the basement bedrooms or whatever. So we housed her. I worked on Puller's campaign. So I was very active in that scene. Before,
so you're talking like 2010,
God, what was 10? When did Michael win? I can't even remember. It was
13.
Okay, so it was like then 11, 12, 13, that time period. And so that's kind of where I kind of went into the politics side.
So what motivated you to run against a 50+ year institution? Yeah.
So in all transparency, I wasn't so much anti-Betty Covington as I was more about the system itself. Given what obstacles and what I dealt with, my goal was to be a change agent and get on there and overhaul a lot of things that I did not like or what I experienced or some of my colleagues that I worked with experienced in the classroom. Betty just happened to be the school board member in the district that I lived in. I moved literally, I'm over in Southbridge, and right across over is River Oaks, which would have been the Woodbridge district, but I happened to live in Southbridge, which was in the Potomac district, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. It was like 2 years after we had bought the house. I knew the school system. I knew a lot of the policies. I knew a lot of the figureheads and the people, the movers and the shakers. And so I thought, you know what, I'll give this a shot. There weren't any other Democrats saying, let me be the one to do this, right? So it was like, okay, so this 32-year-old wants to go and run against an institution, basically, of our school system. That's really what it became.
What were some of the ideas, the big eyes that you running that you wanted to accomplish?
I felt, well, one, I at that time was not extremely thrilled with the leadership of the former superintendent. I felt also that there were, I was also very active in the teachers union at that time. I felt that there was a lot of retaliatory practices done to teachers who were more vocal or active in the community. That was when there was a big push in PWA, the Educators Association, called the Work to the Rule, and various other things. Another big defining moment for me, which really was kind of the final draw with Betty, was there was a vote about the teacher raise at that time being discussed, I believe, in 14 budget cycle. The teachers wanted a raise and the step and the cost of living allowance. The school system gave it to them, but in the middle of the night, as I call it, or in the late hours of the meeting, they changed the contractual work schedule. They added an additional 30 minutes onto the teacher's contract. So to me, it definitely offset the raise, more than offset the raise, but I also felt like that wasn't obviously very transparent. That was not ever really on the table, and that just kind of happened and pulled the rug out from people. And that was definitely I would say, one of the fulcrum against one of my platform of wanting to run for office was overturning the 30-minute contract extension. So I would say if there was any kind of, point, it would have been that I was extremely upset about with the transparency and of course the retaliatory practices.
So once you got on the ballot, what did it take for you to get elected?
Oh God, I don't even remember, like that summer, that fall. It was it was nonstop knocking, door knocking out in there. I mean, this is back in the day, when people actually answered their doors and didn't have the doorbells, the cameras and stuff like that. So you actually had a lot more door to door porch conversations with people. A lot of door knocking. I was able to raise a decent amount of money. I think also going in my favor was, going back to this whole thing about allegedly me brainwashing my students. It's funny that in what came to fruition was students wanted to come help my campaign. Tons of them. I mean, my Facebook memories still pop up all the time from 8 or 9 years ago of like photos of me with this group of kids going out canvassing, and then this group of kids. I mean, we're talking about kids not just from when I taught at Woodbridge Middle, living in the greater Woodbridge community, but there were kids driving out from Gainesville on weekends. Tons of them, like a plethora of kids, not just like the group of five, but I'd say over 30 different kids I taught at Gainesville came out at various stages of the election to come knock doors for me. And so you had this kind of youth movement, this grassroots movement of, people really hitting the doors and going out there. And it was like really running on the message of change, and not so much change against Betty, but change against Waltz. My opponent was not the congenial, lovely, long-standing school board member, everyone's favorite grandmother-like figure. My opponent was Dr. Waltz. And at that time, he was not popular at all with the community. So I used that as a way of kind of propelling myself into a position where the race was competitive, and I was able to win.
I think this is a good teaching moment. What does it take for something not to be a moment, but how to turn something into a movement when you're running for office? What do you think? I mean, because we're seeing that now in the current presidential race. We're seeing
100%.
it's not a moment, but it's a movement.
Agreed.
And you just talked about a movement with young people coming on. What do you think it takes for somebody in running a campaign to turn it into a movement?
I think it's all about your message and really the person that you are, the character that you bring to the table, and the relationships that you've built. I would think it would have been much harder for me to run for that position had I not had already built, 8 years, I don't know when I read 8, 9 years of relationships that I had built in the county, not only just with the Prince William County Democrats and the local electeds and stuff like that, but with parents and students, and word spreads, and how social media is, and even more so now, but it kind of compounds, and you start building this movement, and student A sees that student B's out there doing this. Well, it becomes the cool thing in some sense to be like, yeah, I want to get out there and campaign for Mr. Wilk and stuff like that. So I really think a lot of this, what turns this into a movement, if we look at what Harris Vice President Harris is doing, is she's really trying to capture this group of people that just feel kind of completely left out right now. The ones who feel, and rightfully so, like with the in some ways they can't afford buying their house, they can't afford their groceries, things like that. And by no means do I blame the current presidency with inflation. It's always actually a very educational thing I try to do to people, to explain that we are a global economy, if we haven't understood that yet, that we do not have a lot of control of what's being sold over in the Middle East with their oil, or what this type of, or even at climate change. I gave a good example. My son, who's 9, asked me about inflation, and I explained, supply and demand and different things like that, about how global warming, which the other side doesn't believe is real in many cases, how global warming has basically just completely decimated the orange crop in Florida. And so as a result of that drastic shortage, the price of orange juice has gone up. And like I've said to my son, the consumer has to make a choice. You either continue paying for that and it becomes more of a premium item to drink that orange juice, or you have to find a substitute for that, and at a lower cost, especially if you can't afford the orange juice. So we can continually say that, it's the administration's fault for not, I'm just using orange juice as an example, but there could be a plethora of things to use as examples. But the point, I'm going back to the young and the youth and the ones who might be disengaged or disenchanted. you have a movement, and you see someone with a record like Vice President Harris, who has that more youthful appeal. She has the record of what she did back as a prosecutor, back as a senator, and she is a minority, and I think that's also resonating with a lot of the younger group as well. They're trying to find and capture that, almost that Obama moment that was like for our generation, in a sense, like this was the moment, we saw major change occur. But how do we motivate these young people to get involved? I think it is a movement. It's about building those relationships, having the right message, and continually, like I said, building on it. It's a force, and the momentum is there. You don't want to stop it, but you got to keep people energized. And this, like you said, it's still a long way to go. Yeah. Who would have thought, after, the president's performance at that debate, that we'd be at a point like this now. So the media cycle, it just goes so quickly that it's like, oh, something new, another obstacle, something to overcome, and I think that's another message, we're talking about movement, is you gotta take it day by day, because things are going to change. And you have to be open, and you have to, as the principal of Forest Parks always says at graduation speeches, you have to pivot, right? And you have to adjust and be flexible to, continue meeting that ultimate goal of what you might have.
So once you got elected and you became a elected school board member, what did you see your role, and how would you define what does a school board member do? Because I know the public might think you do one thing and you got control of another thing. Can you explain what a school board member does and what your responsibilities are? Because if this principal is giving you issues, can you go in there and fight? No,
But well, and that's going to that point. What the public thinks, and even as maybe candidates, and I've seen
that's
this.
a good point.
Yeah,
The candidates as
yes,
well.
this is the same thing I'm seeing, kind of the reverse now. Being the board member, knowing what actually can happen versus what cannot happen. Right.
So what did you think when you was running?
Oh, I thought. I'm not going to say I thought I could go in and fire administrators, but I definitely felt like I could have more of a force and more of a pull with something like that. Did I run on a platform saying I was going to fire Dr. Waltz? No. Had that ever crossed my mind? Sure. I think anyone running against an incumbent, against an administration of where you are not fully satisfied, that's always an option on the table. But I think at that point in my life, and at the first couple years of the board, I felt more in an active role in some sense, to kind of really in what I've grown into knowing of what a school board member actually does. And so that's where I think the kind of the misconception is with the public. They think, again, that the board, and maybe I thought this as well, you can go in there and just completely change things, right? That you have the ability to really, in a sense, get rid of any position you want, or really dictate and control what you all want. But the biggest thing, again, is the hardest lesson that I learned initially was, the school board is a collective body. It's not one person. It's 8 collective forces. And I still have to explain to people today that just because I have a belief on something doesn't mean I can get 4 other members to get to the magic number of 5 to get something passed or done. We have influence as one member, maybe with the administration, but we do not have the right to solely dictate what we want. And I think that might have been the biggest growing pain that I had, because I just felt in some sense like, hey, I won. I'm going to go in there and be a mover and a shaker and really kind of turn things around. But that's not how it necessarily goes. And so it really went from almost being like a hellraiser to then being almost, in a sense, a institutionalist, because once I learned the role in some sense and got a better idea of really kind of the capabilities of what a board member can and cannot do, I started then wanting to actively work with the superintendent, because it behooved me to have a superintendent and a school board member actually have a cordial working relationship. And so by working collaboratively with the superintendent at that time, a lot of good things happened for this district, and if I think of, we had a lot of building renovations or building extensions. I mean, the Forest Park track and field was never even on the capital improvement project, and that just happened. So there is something to be said at that time under that leadership, that if you were, in a sense, a team player, or you were working in coordination with the school system, that necessarily your district was going to benefit from it. Now, is that always how things should work? No, but I think that's just how it happened to work at that time, and a lot of deliverables came to the Potomac district more so than it had happened in a long time. And so it was more like, if you wanted something, it could happen quickly. It like I said, it was a different experience. And I've grown into my role more. I've been on, obviously, way more. I had full head of black hair back then, and it's been 8+ years. And so I guess it's weird to think like I'm the elder statesman of the board or something. I guess I am number 2 on that, behind Lori Williams on seniority on the board. But yeah, it's you grow into the role. You go in, like I said, sure, belief and resolute in your views that you're going to do this, and then you actually, the wake up call is that's not necessarily how governing works.
Now, being on the board, do you see people think campaigning is governing?
Yeah.
And they're still campaigning. They haven't switched to governing.
Well, they need to switch, because then you start realizing the liabilities and the legalities behind a lot of different things and stuff like that. That you might be out there and you might say, like, I'm not going to. This last election cycle, I think the big go around was, were these opponents going to fire Dr. McDade if they won their respective races? And again, we look at a lot of
Dr. McDade, she is your.
Oh, sorry. Now we're jumping names. Yes, sorry. Dr. McDade is our current superintendent of Prince William County Schools. I think finishing year 3 of her tenure here already. Time flies. Yeah, so you can go in and say your platform's going to be this. You can go in and say, I'm going to ban this book, or I'm going to make sure that equity's killed. We're going to close the Office of Student Equity. All these crazy things that you hear about, but one member cannot do that. And so, even 2, 3 members can't do that, because it's a majority vote. So the biggest thing I would say, Mayor Wood, about the difference between campaigning and being a elected official is, you don't necessarily campaign on a team. You are the team in a sense. But when you get into a governing body, you are on a team. The individual has to put themselves aside and put the ego aside for the betterment of the entire process. So I would say that is probably best way I can describe the difference between going in from a campaign to being an actual elected official.
What do you say your biggest win as an elected official has been?
Biggest win?
Yeah, like your biggest the thing that you've been most proud of since you've been elected.
I mean, in the immediate, at that time, I was very proud that we did overturn the 30-minute contract extension. I took care of that was one of my things on my platform. As I said, within the first year, I wanted to get that overturned. At that time, I thought that was probably my biggest win. I would say now more so, kind of, again, thinking about it more from a holistic standpoint, things that are wins to me now are things that are more, I'm trying to think of the right word. They become more of an institutional thing versus just really kind of a one win for me. So, for example, the expansion of career tech education. Yes, that's a big thing I promote. I'm a big supporter of, blue collar jobs, labor, stuff like that. That's always been kind of my strong suit. But, adding and expanding career tech ed, like the electrical apprenticeship program, which, I was heavily involved with. And that was something, I worked with the previous superintendent in vetting that and making sure the right partners were in place to make that happen. it had been lagging and had been in a conversation for a while. It just never really kind of had that kind of connector to make it happen. Something like that, and amongst other programs, expansion of career tech education and apprenticeships and things like that. That is a huge, I think, accomplishment for our division, and something I like to say is a great accomplishment. Post-secondary readiness. I felt, and I've even said this to Dr. McDade, it was like kind of one big thing I always wanted. And again, it might be something seems so simple, but really in the end, it really has a major motivator for students, and it has a major indicator in growth and outcomes, is that I wanted to develop a profile of a Prince William County graduate. And Virginia had their blanket one at the VDOE. And, when I was doing at my job at the time, I was doing college career readiness. And I was seeing all across the country, school divisions, big and small, implementing this profile of a graduate for their district. And I was like, why don't we have something specific like that? Like, why is ours so generic? At the time, my former, one of my professors at UVA, he was the superintendent of Virginia Beach schools, Dr. Aaron Spence. He's at Loudoun now. But he had his profile for a Virginia Beach graduate. And I just thought it was the greatest thing. And it was always kind of brought up and pushed aside from previous. And one of the big things when we were hiring Dr. McDade, which I would say is another great accomplishment in a sense of just the change that we've seen in the last couple of years of our school division,
our strategic plan.
And our strategic plan. And long story short, I said to her, when we were, doing our first initial conversations, is I really want a profile of a grad for Prince William County. And she had done the same thing in Chicago, using a lot of the same tools that we already had in Prince William County. And she committed to that. And not only did she take us out through the hells of COVID, but she also brought on a brand new strategic plan. She brought on a profile of a graduate. I mean, it happened all at once. It all came to fruition at once. And the fact that she was able to do that, it felt like she was running laps around predecessors in a sense. I've never seen something kind of all come into place around the same time, and it worked seamlessly. And so when I remember this last school year, we had the profile, but how do you put that into practice is the next thing. And then she revealed those reports, those graduation reports, the student progress reports, that will be coming now every quarter for students that are it's going to encapsulate things, not only like their GPA or their credit, their track, but they're going to incorporate things like their interest inventory, their strengths, their interested colleges, the steps, the process, everything like that, all into one consolidated report. I just think it's the most amazing thing. I was actually looking at it the other week because I'm really proud of it.
Good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you have your network of a great network of elected officials and other mayors. One thing I pride myself is I've built in my job a pretty strong network of other superintendents all over the country that I've worked with before. And I'm very proud of this profile, and I'm very proud of the report. And so when I talk to people that I've worked with years past in other roles who are now like associate superintendents, or they are the superintendent, I'm like, hey, check out this report. I'll upload the PDF. You can see it, but hey, you should talk to someone in my school division because this is really cool.
It's cool. That's cool. What is and you can tell that right to the people watching. What are some things you recommend for people who might not want to be elected to the school board, but they just want to really be engaged? So give them maybe those one or two things they can do to be engaged with the school system.
Yeah, I would say the easy one is, build a relationship with your board member and look for opportunities to be involved. We all have different committees that we get appointments to put people on. I was on Safe Schools forever. I'm back on it again after a little hiatus. But Safe Schools, there's another one, there's a Principals Advisory Council, there's Building Advisory Council. So you don't necessarily have to go and be on one of, I think we have like 8 appointments total, each of us, for a board member. And these terms, like I said, they typically expire within a year or two. So there's openings. And so when I find a parent that is passionate about something, and maybe initially that passion is more negative to the system, my goal is to try to curtail that into positivity and put them in a position where they can actually talk to the right people and bring about maybe the change that they want. Because once again, if you're on the outside, again, you're looking, in a sense, many ways, in a myopic view of your world, which again, your world is the most important world with your child and stuff like that. That is your life, right? But something that maybe with your child may also have a greater impact on others, or you don't necessarily see what you want and how that could negatively impact everyone else. You see what I'm saying? So it's like I try to find people's strengths, going back to that student profile thing of finding people's strengths, adult strengths, and trying to harness those skills and put them in the right position. So, I back to school now, I used to have a parent every year get my ear about something about special education, right? Well, the position just always never was fully open, but I remembered that person and I made sure I documented that and everything like that. And as soon as that position opened up this last go around, I reached out to that parent and they were surprised that actually I still remembered really what they wanted to be involved with. And I, offered them the position and they took it. So, but it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be those positions. Right. Every building has, like you said, a principal's advisory council where it's staff, it's parents, it's the administration. I go to a lot of these meetings. Forest Park's a good example of one that I've been to quite a bit, and Potomac High School. A lot of times they struggle to find the parents to be there. Yeah. And there's no better way to really kind of get the temperature of your school than being involved in that actual school and having a voice and being proactive. I saw on a Facebook group today, they're always so fun, on a group, someone posted about they were having reservations about sending their kid to Potomac High School. And this is something I hear often in this particular community where I see this posted a lot. And so I've gotten to a point now where I've not reacted and got, really defensive about it, but simply reaching out and saying, hey, contact me if you want to know about the programs of this building. Mm-hmm. Keeping it straight line, professional. The past, I would ask for the parent to call me and I would go through this whole kind of tirade about why this school still has a negative reputation that apparently he's had since the 90s, etc., historical kind of stuff to it. Because, unfortunately, people go online, they hear things, they think, oh, that's the bad school or things like that. Or they go, in my opinion, sometimes those niche or great school, those ratings are arbitrary. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, you have to really have a conversation with people and then listen. It's like, I will help facilitate a meeting with you and the principal, and that principal will give you a tour of that building and talk to you.
They say you asking the wrong question. Do you want to know how many kids go to Ivy League out of here?
Yeah.
The Cambridge program and all of that,
exactly.
Right? So people don't even
They don't even know. They don't even know the program.
They don't even know the Cambridge program.
They don't even know what's there.
Yeah. Tell us what the future holds for Justin Wilk. If you had a crystal ball, where would you be, 4 or 5 years from now? And, looking back, what's that one big accomplishment that you think you would have done?
Life, going through life and having kids and being a supportive spouse, and this is not a hidden fact. I think, my wife even told her school and her students. So my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer a couple months ago. And I know that when things like this occur in your life, fortunately it was caught early and we're going through the treatment and, the doctors are great. When something like this happens in your life, it completely changes your whole paradigm in some sense, mm-hmm. right? And maybe like what you kind of foresaw in your head of what your future was going to be is not necessarily where you see it now. And that goes, in a sense, the way we were talking about, the little stages, building a movement and stuff like that. I'm learning more. You have to take it day by day. I've always, in a sense, been that OCD person who wanted to plan everything. Literally. I mean, I at my graduation for high school, going back to that, members of my family had signs saying Wilk 2032 because I thought I was going to run for president in 2032. Crazy now thinking of that. But I had a timeline, and I thought everything had to be done at a certain point. I said, I want to be married before I'm 29. I want to have my first kid at this. It was all very planned and scripted. I said I wanted to be in office at this point. Well, now in a sense, it's like you throw it all out the door in some sense. And what I'm learning and slowly kind of evolving to this kind of new perspective on life is you can't control things as much as you may think you have control over things. Something is going to happen.
Wow.
And it actually coincided in a sense fortuitously that I had just started getting back into my relationship with God and church. It's been one of the best things I've ever done for my life. Yeah. So I don't know, 5 years from now, to your point, as you sum it up, no, I have no idea. As much as you want to try to plan out and predict your life, don't. Because the reality is things change on the fly. And just be flexible, be spontaneous. I never thought I was a spontaneous person. I really wasn't a spontaneous. In college, I had to plan the party 2 weeks in advance or whatever. My schedule always had to be pretty scripted on what I wanted to do. And but be spontaneous, be open to change, don't be so resolute or confined into your viewpoint where that is the only thing that matters. I think that is what I'm learning more so now than anything in this experience with the latest, diagnosis in my family and stuff, is that you have to just take life day by day and be fulfilled in a sense with what you've accomplished. And that's really all that should matter. I used to be someone who, took it very personally when I saw people, saying things online. And, as an elected official, this too, is like, sometimes it's hard. You have to have very thick skin to do it. But
Absolutely.
But I would always be the first person like, what, I got to fix that. I got to, try to do whatever I can to fix that. In some cases, sometimes you can't fix it. And you have to be comfortable with that and realize that not everyone is going to like you. And that's just part of how life is. And so I guess I would say those are just kind of lessons if you want to get into politics or if you want to pursue any type of role in public life. I think those are the basics in some sense, that it maybe took me longer to understand, but now I've kind of come full circle to understanding really more so than ever what these words actually mean. So it's a lot easier for me to say it to people than to live it.
Easier said than done.
Those would be my words of advice at this moment. There could be many more, but I don't know.
How can people who watch this around the world now stay connected with you?
I'm very active on social media. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. You can add me on Facebook. Those are great ways. You can email me in the school system. It's jwilk, WILK, like milk, but Wilk. I always say that because, I also do sales. So I have to explain to the people when they're writing down my email address. At pwcs.edu, like I said, I want people to feel engaged. I want people to understand that a lot of times, local government, I taught this as a civics teacher.
Come on now.
Yeah, I taught this as a civics teacher, and it's the reality of the world we're in is the biggest impact on your life is local government. I loved every 4 years doing a presidential election project. It's crazy. The last one was Romney Obama, just to age me out of the classroom. That's the last time I was teaching a president project in a class. But the elections, it's obviously it's captivating, the media, everyone's on top of it. And literally now with social media, like everything is just up to date, something new. But, moving past all, I guess it's a sex.
Let me ask this question.
Yeah.
How important do you think a podcast for just local government is, talking to local elected officials, because it just didn't exist?
I agree. It's collaboration. I was sitting here during your last interview learning a lot about another community that's only, 35, 40 minutes south of us. And as I've watched this, the young gentleman, the mayor from Arkansas.
Earl, Arkansas.
Yeah.
Jalen Smith.
Yeah.
Mayor.
I learn things all the time, and tuning into this and watching it periodically, just to network and see who all these people are that and the conversations and the different upbringings. I think it is important to have a podcast like this. I think it's important for people to be involved in local government, because the greatest change agent in your life is going to be your town, your county, your school system. that's going to have the greatest impact on your life. Project 2025 is a scary thing, but I mean, it's terrifying, but until actually it's in the local level, that's a whole nother thing. But it's scary. It could impact the local level. But my point is be scared also about things that are happening in the local level, because that is going to have a greater impact on your life, your kids' lives, your spouse, your family, whoever. That's going to be where it matters.
Wow.
So it's an honor to be here today, because
thank you for taking time out. I know we've been trying to catch up, and it's finally happened.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you've been watching the Elected and Engaged podcast. We are your voice of local leadership. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you comment. Let Justin know what really impacted, what you took away from this. Share this with your family and friends who need to learn more about local government. And we'll see you next time on the Elected and Engaged podcast.